The yellowed letter trembled in my hands. Uncle Terry's familiar script barely legible. To Lena, when they finally throw me away. 3 years I'd avoided this family, only to return and discover my beloved uncle banished to a freezing garage. His wheelchair marks were apparently too unsightly for Aunt Carla's perfect floors. I watched them discard his few belongings into a state facility van, like unwanted trash. But the look he gave me wasn't defeat. It was a signal. They believed they were getting rid of a burden. Instead, they unknowingly sparked a reckoning no one in this family was ready for. The highway ahead stretched like a ribbon of painful memories. 3 years had been enough time to forget the scent of the pine trees lining my hometown's main road, but not enough to forget why I left. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, passing the cheerful Welcome to Pineville sign. It's upbeat, font mocking my reluctance. My name is Lena Whitaker, and at 26, I was doing the one thing I swore I'd never do again: return to my family home for Thanksgiving. Not by choice, mind you. Aunt Carla's email had declared it mandatory family attendance, just like a corporate meeting, no excuses allowed. The two-story colonial belonging to Aunt Carla and Uncle Rick looked exactly as I remembered: pristine white siding, an immaculate lawn, and utterly devoid of warmth. I parked behind a line of cars already filling the circular driveway. 3 deep breaths later, I stepped into the crisp November air, overnight bag in hand. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence. A voice called from the porch. My cousin Amber stood with her arms crossed, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail. Mom said you probably wouldn't show. Nice to see you too, I muttered, forcing a grimace that felt nothing like a smile. Inside, the house felt even worse. The tension hung thick like fog. Family photos adorned the hallway, meticulously arranged to showcase the ideal Whitaker family. I immediately noticed some were missing, the ones with Uncle Terry. Uncle Terry was my father's brother, the life of every family gathering. He taught me to fish, secretly slipped me $20 bills for ice cream, and genuinely listened when I spoke about my dreams of becoming a writer. Lena, Aunt Carla's voice cut through my thoughts. She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume overpowering. You look healthy. The pause before healthy spoke volumes. Where's Uncle Terry? I asked, ignoring her backhanded compliment. I haven't seen him since before his accident. A shadow crossed Carla's face. He's watching TV in the garage. You know how he is now? Doesn't like to be in the way. The accident had happened 4 years ago, a motorcycle crash that left Terry paralyzed from the waist down. I'd been away at college, and by the time I came home for a visit, the family dynamics had already shifted. I found my way to the garage without waiting for directions. The space had been converted into something resembling a bedroom, but only in the most basic sense. A hospital bed sat against one wall, a small 90s TV perched on a folding table across from it. The concrete floor was partially covered by a thin area rug that didn't reach the edges. And there was Uncle Terry gazing at a game show with glazed eyes, a threadbare blanket across his legs. He looked thinner than I remembered, his once robust frame now sharp angles beneath a flannel shirt. "Uncle Terry," I said softly. He turned, confusion clouding his face for a moment. Then recognition dawned, and the smile that broke across his features was like sunshine after rain. "Lynn, well, I'll be damned." His voice was weaker, but still held that characteristic warmth. "Come here and give your old uncle a hug." I crossed the room and embraced him carefully, noting how fragile he felt. The garage was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. "Why are you out here?" I asked, pulling up a metal folding chair. Terry's smile faltered. "Your Aunt Carla says the wheelchair marks up the hardwood. Plus, the noise of the lift disturbs their sleep." He waved a hand dismissively. "It's fine. I get the TV all to myself." The TV was an ancient box model with rabbit ears. The game show fuzzed in and out. "How have you been, kiddo? Still writing those stories?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in. "My throat got a job at a magazine in Boston. Nothing fancy, but it's a start. That's my girl. His eyes lit up. I always said you'd make something of yourself. We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on lost time. He asked about my apartment, my friends, my dreams, all the things no one else in the family ever bothered. To ask, I told him about the novel I was working on in my spare time, and he listened with genuine interest. Dinner's ready. Amber's voice called from the doorway. Didn't even step into the garage. Mom says, come now, or don't come at all. The dining room was a showcase of Thanksgiving excess. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, all arranged on Carla's best china. Rick sat at the head of the table, already carving the bird with military precision. Nice of you to join us, Lena, he said without looking up. I see you found Terry. I took a seat next to my younger cousin, Jake, who was glued to his phone. Moments later, Uncle Terry wheeled himself in, struggling to navigate the narrow dining room entrance. For God's sake, Terry, watch the wallpaper. Carla snapped as his wheelchair scraped against the wall. That's custom. No one moved to help him. I stood to rearrange chairs, making space at the table. Sit over here, Uncle Terry. I patted the spot beside me. Oh, he usually eats on the TV tray in the garage, Carla said quickly. It's easier. For everyone. I'm sure he'd rather eat with family on Thanksgiving, I countered, my voice firm. Terry gave me a grateful look as he positioned himself at the table. Dinner conversations swirled around us. Amber's promotion, Jake's college applications, Rick's golf handicap. No one addressed Terry directly, as if his paralysis had somehow made him invisible. Then came the moment that made my blood boil. Assurance? Denied the new wheelchair cushion again, Carla said, sighing dramatically as she passed the mashed potatoes. Another $500 we'll have to spend. It's like carrying dead weight, I swear. Terry's face remained impassive, but I saw his knuckles whiten around his fork. Have you tried the appeal process? I asked. There are patient advocates who— Oh, Lena, please, Carla interrupted. You've been gone 3 years? Don't come back and start telling us how to handle things you know nothing about. Jake snickered. Amber rolled her eyes. I was just trying to help, I muttered. The best help would be if someone else took a turn dealing with all this, Rick added, gesturing vaguely toward Terry with his knife. Your aunt and I have shouldered the burden. Alone since your father passed. Terry cleared his throat. I'm sitting right here, Rick, and we're all very aware of that fact. Rick replied coldly. I couldn't stomach another bite after that. As soon as dinner ended, I helped clear plates, then slipped back out to the garage where Terry had retreated. He was staring at a photo album on his lap. Sorry about that, I said, sitting beside him. Don't be. You're the only decent blood I have left in this place. He winked, but the humor didn't reach his eyes. They forget that I can still hear, still think. We sat in comfortable silence for a while before he spoke again. How long are you staying? Just the weekend. I have to be back at work on Monday. He nodded slowly, turning a page in his album. That's what I figured. Later that night, I stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water and overheard voices from Rick's study. The Pine Valley Care Center said they can take him Saturday, Carla was saying. Medicaid will cover most of it. What about his things? Rick asked. I've already packed the essentials. The rest can go to Goodwill. I froze, glass halfway. To my lips? What about Lena? She seems attached. Lena left this family years ago. She doesn't get a vote. I stepped back into the hallway, my heart hammering. They were going to dump Uncle Terry in a state facility while I was here this weekend. The realization made me sick. The next morning I confronted them over breakfast. You're sending Uncle Terry to a nursing home? I demanded, not bothering to hide my anger. Carla looked up from her coffee, her face a mask of practiced concern. It's a care facility, Lena. They can provide the round-the-clock attention he needs. He doesn't need round-the-clock care. He needs dignity and family. Rick scoffed. You've been here less than a day. We've been caring for him for 4 years. You don't get to judge. caring for him. He's living in your garage with a TV from 1995. That's enough. Rick's voice rose. You're too soft, Lena. Always have been. And you're not really part of this family anymore, are you? Not since you ran off to find yourself or whatever you call abandoning your responsibilities. My responsibilities? He's your brother. And this is our house, Carla cut in. Our rules. The decision is made. I stormed out, tears burning my eyes. The weekend crawled by in intense silence. I spent most of it with Terry in the garage, trying to memorize his stories, his laugh, knowing what was coming. Saturday morning arrived with a sense of dread. A white van with Pine Valley Care Center painted on the side pulled into the driveway. 2 orderlies emerged, clipboards in hand. Time to go, Terry, Rick announced, entering the garage with Carla. I watched in horror as they tossed Terry's meager belongings into plastic bags. Carla ripped the photo album from his lap. This stays. These are family photos. Carla, please. Terry's voice cracked. That's all I have of Mom. She ignored him, tucking the album under her arm. The orderlies helped transfer Terry to their transport wheelchair. I stood helplessly by the door, tears streaming down my face. I'll visit you, I promised. As soon as I can. As they wheeled him down the driveway, Terry turned to look at me one last time. His gaze held mine for a long, meaningful moment, as if he were trying to tell me something. Then the van doors closed, and he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt even emptier. The silence more accusatory. I wandered into my old bedroom, untouched since high school. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I noticed something poking out from beneath the frame. I knelt down and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Written across the front in Uncle Terry's distinctive handwriting were the words, "To Lena, when they finally throw me away." My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a letter written on lined paper dated 2 years ago. If you're reading this, I'm already gone, but you know the truth. Now it's your turn to decide what to do with it. The paper trembled in my hands as I unfolded Uncle Terry's letter. His handwriting was unmistakable, the looping cursive that had signed countless birthday cards throughout my childhood. Dear Lena, it began, if you're reading this, I'm already gone, but you know the truth. Now it's your turn to decide what to do with it. I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, the moonlight streaming through the window, providing just enough light to read by. I didn't dare turn on the lamp, afraid that Carla or Rick might investigate. After my accident, things changed quickly. Not just my legs, but the way they looked at me. Carla and Rick swooped in while I was still in the hospital. They told everyone they'd handle Mom's estate and care for me. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? They were family. I remembered that time vaguely. I'd been a junior in college, swamped with finals when Grandma died just 6 months after Uncle Terry's accident. I hadn't even made it home for the funeral. But here's what nobody knows. Terry's letter continued. Mom changed her will after my accident. She knew I'd need help, and she didn't trust Carla's intentions. She left everything to me. The house, her savings, everything. But that will mysteriously disappeared after she died. My breath caught. Grandma's house, the beautiful Victorian where I'd spent summers as a child, had been sold shortly after her death. Carla had claimed it was what Mom wanted, and the proceeds had allegedly gone to Terry's medical care. Carla filed the original will from 5 years earlier, the one that split everything between her and me. Then she convinced the court I was mentally incompetent to handle my share. Convenient, right? A hot flush of anger washed over me. I'd always sensed something was off about the whole arrangement, but I'd been too wrapped up in my own escape to investigate. There's a locked drawer in my old desk in the study, the one Mom gave me when I graduated college. Carla thinks she has the only key, but Mom gave me a spare. It's taped inside my old tackle box in the shed. In that drawer, you'll find the real will and proof of where the money went. Money Mom never got to use. K? Money that was supposed to keep me independent. The letter went on, detailing years of financial manipulation, of being slowly stripped of dignity and autonomy, of watching as Carla's boutique business mysteriously flourished right after Grandma's estate was settled, of being moved from the main house to the garage once he became too much trouble. I'm not asking you to fight my battles, Lena Bean. I've made my peace with whatever happens, but I thought you should know the truth. You were always the one with the backbone to stand. Up to them, do with this what you will. I love you, kiddo. Uncle Terry. I folded the letter with shaking hands and slipped it into my pocket. Sleep was impossible now. My mind raced with questions and a growing sense of rage. How could they do this to him, to their own family? The next morning, I waited until Carla announced she was heading to her boutique and Rick left for his golf game. I claimed a headache and stayed behind, ostensibly to pack for my departure that afternoon. The moment their cars disappeared down the driveway, I sprinted to the backyard shed. It was musty and cobwebbed, filled with gardening equipment and boxes of Christmas decorations. In the corner sat an old green tackle box, dusty from disuse. My fingers fumbled with the rusty latch. Inside, beneath layers of fishing lures and tangled line, I found a small brass key taped to the bottom of the box, just as Terry had described. The study was off limits to everyone but Rick, but today I didn't care about rules. I slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. Uncle Terry's desk sat in the corner, a beautiful cherrywood piece that had belonged to my grandmother. Before him, the key fit perfectly into a small drawer on the right side. Inside, I found a manila folder labeled Mother's Affairs in Terry's handwriting. But when I pulled out the drawer completely, I noticed something else, a false bottom. I pried it open with a letter opener from the desktop. Jackpot. Hidden in the secret compartment was a thick envelope containing medical records, legal documents, and most importantly, a notarized letter from my grandmother addressed to Terry. My dearest son, it read, in light of your accident, I've updated my will to ensure you're taken care of. Don't let your sister bully you. This house is yours, and so is my savings. The new will is filed with Mr. Donovan downtown. Stay strong. All my love, Mom. Attached was a copy of the updated will dated after Terry's accident, leaving the entire estate to him. There was also a receipt for the filing of the will with the county clerk's office, signed by a lawyer named Harold Donovan. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully replaced the documents and locked the drawer. My heart was pounding as I slipped out of the study and back to my room. That afternoon, I made an excuse about needing to check out a bookstore downtown before leaving. Instead, I drove straight to the county clerk's office. The records department was nearly empty. On a Saturday afternoon, a tired-looking clerk named Barbara helped me search for the will. After 30 minutes of digging through files, she found it, a second will for Eleanor Whitaker, dated after the one Carla had probated. It had been filed but never executed. This happens sometimes, Barbara explained. Family members file the wrong will, especially if there are multiple versions. But it's strange that no one contested it. I thanked her and made copies of everything. My next stop was the bank where Terry had his accounts. I couldn't access his records, of course, but I could check public property transactions. Sure enough, I found a record of a $90,000 withdrawal from Terry's account 5 years ago. Right around the time Carla's boutique had undergone a miraculous renovation. By the time I left town that Sunday, I had a digital folder, full of evidence and a burning determination to make things right. But first, I needed to see Uncle Terry. Pine Valley Care Center was a dismal one-story building on the outskirts of town. The smell of industrial disinfectant hit me the moment I walked through the doors. I signed in at the front desk and was directed to a common room where residents sat in wheelchairs, staring blankly at a TV mounted on the wall. Uncle Terry was in the corner, gazing out a window at the parking lot. He looked even smaller than he had just days before dressed in a generic hospital gown instead of his own clothes. Uncle Terry. I touched his shoulder gently. He turned, his eyes taking a moment to focus. When recognition dawned, his face lit up. Lena, you came. His voice sounded like he hadn't used it much. Of course, I came. I told you I would. Pulled up a chair beside him, noting how the other residents seemed medicated into compliance. None of Terry's usual vibrancy remained in this sterile environment. How are they treating you? I asked, though the answer was written all over his diminished frame. Oh, 3 squares and a roof. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Better than some have it. I found your letter, I said quietly, leaning closer. His eyes widened slightly, then darted around to make sure no one was listening. Did you now? And I'm going to fix this. All of it. I promise you. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw a flicker of the old Terry, the man who taught me to stand up for myself when the schoolyard bullies came calling. It won't be easy, he warned. Carla's got the whole town convinced she's a saint for taking me in. I don't care what they did, what they're doing, it's wrong. Terry reached out and squeezed my hand. His skin felt paper thin. You know why I always liked you best, Lena Bean? Guess you've got fire, just like your mom did. I stayed until visiting hours ended, promising to return soon. Before I left, I read him the final page of his letter, the part he'd written to give himself strength. They can lie to everyone, but not to you, kiddo. You've always been the only one brave enough to tell the truth. As I drove back to Boston that night, those words echoed in my mind. The truth. After years of running from this family, I was now the only one willing to fight for it. 3 days later, I stood on Aunt Carla's pristine porch, one hand clutching my evidence folder, the other poised to knock. I'd taken emergency leave from work, told my roommate I might not be back for a while, and driven straight through from Boston with a singular purpose. When Carla opened the door, her smile faltered at the sight of me. Lena, what are you doing back so soon? We need to talk, I said, pushing past her into the foyer. About Grandma's will. Her face hardened. Immediately. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I pulled out the copy of the second will. This is the will Grandma filed after Terry's accident. The one that left everything to him, not you. Carla's eyes narrowed as she snatched the paper from my hands. Where did you get? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you filed the wrong will. You took Terry's inheritance. She scanned the document, then looked up with a dismissive laugh. This is obviously a forgery. My mother would never cut me out like that. It's notarized, Carla, filed with the county. Well, it's too late now anyway. The estate was settled years ago. She tried to hand the paper back, but I didn't take it. Never too late to correct Frog. Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Be very careful with your accusations, Lena. You're playing with fire. No, I'm playing with the truth. The truth about how you manipulated your way into Grandma's house. How you've treated Terry like garbage. How you've stolen what was rightfully his. Carla's voice turned sickeningly sweet. Oh, Lena, always the dramatic one. Terry's mental state has been deteriorating for years. He's paranoid, confused. He probably told you all sorts of fantastical stories. The county records told me the story, Carla. The bank statements told me the story. I stepped closer. The $90,000 that mysteriously disappeared from Terry's account right when your boutique got that fancy renovation that told me the story. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. You ungrateful little, she caught herself. Terry was living in my home for years. I deserved compensation for his care. Care? You kept him in the garage like old furniture. Get out of my house. Her voice was ice. And if you pursue this ridiculous vendetta, I'll make sure everyone knows you're just after money, trying to loot a crippled man's pity. I left shaking with rage, but also with a strange sense of validation. Her reaction had confirmed everything. That evening, my phone exploded with notifications. My cousin Amber had posted a long, tearful status about how mentally unstable I'd become, how I was spreading lies about Mom to get attention. Jake had shared it, adding that I was always jealous of their success. The smear campaign had begun. The next morning, I visited a probate attorney named Sarah Lewis. Her office was small but professional. In a converted Victorian downtown, it's an unusual case, she admitted after reviewing my documents. The second will can be reopened, but after this much time, it'll be challenging. The courts don't like disturbing settled estates. What about the fraud aspect? That helps, but we need strong evidence of deliberate concealment. She studied me over her glasses. Are you prepared for how ugly this could get? Family lawsuits are brutal. I'm doing this for Uncle Terry. He's the only real family I have left. As I left the attorney's office, a text from an unknown number appeared on my phone. Meet me at Donovan Park. 3 p.m. I have info about Terry. Come alone. The message wasn't signed, but something told me it was important. Donovan Park was a small green space near the county courthouse, usually deserted during weekdays. At 3 p.m. sharp, I sat on a bench near the fountain. A tall man with salt and pepper hair approached, his military bearing evident in his straight posture. "Are you Lena?" he asked. I nodded cautiously. "My name is Elijah Morton. I served with your uncle in Desert Storm." He sat beside me. "Your post about Terry on the community board." I hadn't posted anything publicly, which meant one of my cousins had shared my private messages. "What do you know about my uncle?" Elijah's weathered face softened. "Carrie saved my life once, pulled me out of a burning Humvee when everyone else ran. That's the kind of man he is." Kay paused. "Or was before that family of yours broke him. Down, you know about that?" "I visited him regularly until about 2 years ago when your aunt banned me from the house. Said I was upsetting him with war stories." Elijah scoffed. "What I was doing was listening to him. He told me everything about the will, about all of it. He was afraid to fight back because Carla threatened to put him in a home if he caused trouble." Elijah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. "About 3 years ago. Terry asked me to record him. Said he wanted his side of the story documented just in case. I took the drive with trembling fingers. Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just help him. He deserves better than what they did to him." That night in my motel room, I plugged the thumb drive into my laptop. Terry's face filled the screen, healthier. Then his eyes clearer, but the resignation already evident in his expression. "My name is Terrence Whitaker," he began. "And I'm recording this as a testament to the events following my accident and my mother's death." For the next hour, he detailed everything. Carla's gradual takeover of his finances, the missing will, the isolation, the threats. He named dates, amounts, witnesses. It was devastating and comprehensive. The next day, the pushback escalated. I received a call from Child Protective Services informing me that a report had been filed claiming I'd left my younger cousin unattended during my Thanksgiving visit. It was completely fabricated, but it still required me to meet with an investigator. When I returned to my motel afterward, exhausted and disheartened, I found the door ajar. Inside, my laptop was gone, along with the thumb drive. Someone had broken in while I was dealing with CPS. I slumped onto the bed, overwhelmed. Maybe this was hopeless. Carla had connections in town, money, influence. I had nothing but copies of documents and a missing video. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Rick. "You don't want to dig up ghosts, Lena? Not in this family." It was the closest thing to an admission I'd get. I almost gave up then. Almost packed my bags and returned to my safe, distant life in Boston. But that evening, I visited Terry at Pine Valley. The facility was even more depressing in the fluorescent evening lighting. Terry was in his room this time, staring at the ceiling. "Uncle Terry," I said softly. He turned his head slowly. Recognition took longer this time, and I wondered what medications they had him on. "Lena Bean," he whispered. "You came back?" Of course I did. I promised. I didn't tell him about the break-in or the threats. Instead, I sat beside him, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of lucidity. When I stood to leave, I noticed something taped to the wall beside his bed. A faded crayon drawing of a little girl with wild curls standing next to a tall man. At the bottom, in childish handwriting, me and Uncle Terry fishing. I'd drawn that picture when I was 7. Kept this all these years? I asked, my throat tight with emotion. Best day of my life, Terry murmured, his eyes clearer. For a moment you caught that big bass and wouldn't let anyone else take the credit. Stood up to your dad even. Something clicked inside me. I'd always had the courage to stand up. I'd just forgotten it somewhere along the way. Back at the motel, I dug out my backup copy of Terry's letter, the one I'd scanned to my cloud account. I couldn't post the video, but I could share this. I created an anonymous account and uploaded select portions of the letter to the local community Reddit thread, careful to redact anything that might identify Terry directly. The post was titled Elder Abuse and Inheritance Fraud in Pineville, a Family's Dark Secret. By morning, it had hundreds of comments. People were outraged, sharing stories of similar experiences with elderly relatives. Some recognized the boutique details and had already connected the dots to Carla. Negative reviews began appearing on her business page. How can you trust someone who would steal from her own brother? One read. A local news blogger reached out to the Reddit account, asking for an interview. The tide was beginning to turn. Later that day, I received another text from Rick. Take down that post or we sue for defamation. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to my attorney, who advised documenting all threats. We were building a case piece by piece. The final push came unexpectedly. A reporter from Channel 5 News contacted me, having heard rumors about the situation. They wanted to do a feature on elder abandonment, using Terry's case as an example. I'll only agree if you tell his story with dignity, I insisted. This isn't about sensation. It's about justice. It's a reporter, a woman named Dana with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw, agreed. People need to know this happens, even in good families. The interview was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Carla launched a counteroffensive, posting a tearful Facebook video about being betrayed by her niece and false accusations from a troubled girl. But the comment section wasn't buying it. People asked pointed questions about Terry's condition, about the will, about the money. Carla's carefully constructed image was crumbling. I visited Terry every day, watching him grow stronger with each visit, as if my presence alone was medicine. I brought proper clothes, books, his favorite snacks. The staff noticed the difference and began treating him with more care. You know what the worst part was? Terry confided during one visit. Not the garage or the cold or even the money. It was that they thought I was stupid. That the accident took my mind along with my legs. They're the stupid ones, I replied, squeezing his hand. And soon everyone will know it. On the day before the interview, I received an unexpected call. From Elijah. I made a backup of that video, he said without preamble. Never trust originals to anyone. That's what the military taught me. I'll bring it to the station tomorrow. Hopes surged through me. With the video testimony, the will copies, and the bank records, we had a solid case. As I hung up, another call came through. This one from Sarah Lewis, my attorney. Lena, I've been in contact with Harold Donovan, the lawyer who helped your grandmother update her will. He's retired now, but he remembers the case clearly. He's willing to testify that Carla was informed of the second will and chose to ignore it. Pieces were falling into place. Justice for Terry was finally within reach. That night, I sat alone in my motel room, reviewing my notes for the interview. My phone chimed with a notification. Carla had tagged me in another social media post, this one claiming I was unstable and making up stories for attention. I switched off my phone without reading further. Tomorrow, the real story would be told, and for once, the truth would be louder than Carla's lies. The Channel 5 news van parked outside Pine Valley Care Center stuck out like a sore thumb. Its bright logo seemed to shine a spotlight on years of hidden family secrets. I stood in the lobby, smoothing my blouse nervously as Dana, the reporter, set up her equipment in a small meeting room. Remember I told her, this isn't about me. It's about what happened to my uncle and how many others might be suffering the same fate. Dana nodded, her eyes kind but professional. We'll focus on the system that allows this to happen. But Lena, your part in this story matters too. Viewers connect with people, not just issues. Uncle Terry was wheeled in by an attendant wearing the button-down shirt and slacks I'd brought him earlier that week. He looked more like himself than he had in days, though anxiety creased his forehead. "You sure about this, Lena Bean?" he whispered as the attendant positioned him by the window. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I squeezed his shoulder. "I'm sure. Are you?" He nodded, a spark of the old Terry flaring in his eyes. "Let's set the record straight." The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Terry spoke with dignity about his accident, the changes in his family's treatment, and his gradual loss of autonomy. I filled in the gaps with what I'd discovered about the will and the financial manipulation. Dana asked thoughtful questions, never sensationalizing, but never flinching from the hard truths either. "We'll air this tomorrow evening," she promised as her cameraman packed up. "It's a powerful story." That night, my phone exploded with notifications. Someone had leaked that the interview was happening, and Carla was in full damage control mode. She'd posted a tearful video claiming she was being victimized by liberal media, and that family matters should stay private. The comment section wasn't having it. "You've got nothing to hide. Why are you so worried?" wrote one local. Another chimed in. "I've seen how Terry was treated at family functions. Shame on you, Carla." The tide of public opinion was turning, but I knew Carla wouldn't go down without a fight. I was right. The next morning, I found my car's tires slashed in the motel parking lot. A note on the windshield read simply, "Go home." Instead, I called a cab and headed to the county records office. I needed to double-check something that had been nagging at me since I first read Terry's letter. I need any documents relating to genetic testing ordered by the court for the Whitaker family. I told Barbara, the clerk who'd helped me before. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. 20 minutes later, she returned with a thin folder. "Found this in the sealed family court records," she said. "Had to pull some strings." She slid it across the counter with a knowing look. Inside was correspondence from a genetics lab dated shortly after my birth. The letterhead read, "Midwest Genetic Services." I scanned the contents, my heart beginning to race. Test confirms 99.9% probability of paternity. I couldn't process. The rest? The room seemed to tilt sideways. That evening, after the news segment aired, I drove to a pharmacy and bought an at-home DNA test. I needed to know for sure. 2 weeks later, the results arrived in my email while I was sitting in my attorney's office discussing our court filing. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked as the color drained from my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I have," I whispered, turning my phone to show her the results. The test confirmed what the court records had suggested. Terry wasn't my uncle. He was my father. I drove straight to Pine Valley, my mind racing with questions. How long had Terry known? Why hadn't he told me directly? Was this why Carla had always treated me differently? I found Terry in the day room watching the small TV where residents gathered. In the 2 weeks since our interview aired, he'd gained weight and color. Staff, aware of his story now, had been treating him with newfound respect. "Uncle Terry," I said, sitting beside him, "we need to talk." His eyes met mine, and I saw immediately that he knew why I was there. "You found out," he said softly. "It wasn't a question." "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay calm. Terry sighed, wheeling his chair toward a quieter corner of the room. "I wanted to, Lena, so many times. A bit. wasn't just my secret to tell. The story spilled out slowly. Terry and my mother, not my aunt, as I'd been raised to believe, had been in love during his military service. She got pregnant, but Terry was deployed overseas. By the time he returned, Carla and Rick had convinced my mother she couldn't raise a child alone. They offered to adopt me. "Your mother died when you were just 2, Terry explained, his voice heavy with old grief. I was back overseas. By the time I got home, Carla had legal custody and wouldn't let me near you. Said it would confuse you. So you just gave up." I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. "No, kiddo. I fought for years, but Rick had connections at the courthouse, and I was just a veteran with PTSD and no legal standing. The adoption was closed. They threatened to move away where I'd never find you if I kept pushing. So you stayed." My uncle, Terry's eyes filled with tears. "Being your uncle was better than not being in your life at all. I got to see you grow up, teach you to fish, watch you become this amazing, strong woman." He reached for my hand. "I didn't want you to carry that weight too. The weight of knowing your whole life was built on lies." I sat in silence, letting the truth sink in. All those years of feeling like an outsider in my own family suddenly made sense. I wasn't imagining the distance Carla kept, the different ways she treated me compared to her biological children. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," Terry said. "I hoped maybe after this was all settled, we could talk about it properly. Does Carla know that I know?" "Not from me, but if you found the records, ... I nodded slowly. "I should get back. We're filing the court motion tomorrow." As I stood to leave, Terry caught my wrist. "Lena, no matter what happens with all this, legal, business, just know I've always been proud to be your father, even when I couldn't say it out loud." The revelation sent me into an emotional tailspin. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process 26 years of identity built on quicksand. By the time I returned to my motel, it was past midnight. My phone showed 16 missed calls, most from my attorney, 1 from Elijah, and 3 from an unknown number. I listened to the voicemails in order. "Sarah, Lena, call me immediately. Something's happened with Carla's boutique. Elijah, turn on the news, kid. All hell's breaking loose. Unknown, this is Officer Danville with Pineville Police. We need to speak with you regarding an incident at Whitaker Boutique." I turned on the local news to find Carla's boutique had been vandalized. Windows smashed, THIEF spray painted across the storefront. The reporter mentioned the recent allegations of elder abuse and fraud that had aired on a competing channel. I felt sick. This wasn't what I wanted. Justice, yes, but not vigilante destruction. The next morning, Sarah called with an update. "The court has agreed to hear our motion to reopen the estate next week." "But, Lena, there's more. Your DNA results. We can use them." "How?" "As a direct descendant of Terry, you have standing too. Challenge the will on his behalf. It strengthens our case considerably." I thought about the implications. Going public with my parentage would change everything. There would be no going back to the life I'd known. "Do it," I said. "Accuse everything." We have. The news about the DNA test spread like wildfire through. By afternoon, Amber had posted a scathing rant about me making up lies to steal family money. But this time, the comments weren't in her favor. People were connecting the dots between Terry's story, the hidden will, and why Carla might have wanted to keep me in the dark about my real father. 3 days before our court date, Elijah called with a breakthrough. "I found Donovan, the lawyer who helped your grandmother file the second will. He's retired to Florida now, but he's willing to testify by video. Says he remembers Carla coming to his office and being furious about the changes." Pieces were falling into place. We had the will copy bank records showing suspicious transfers, Terry's video testimony, and now a witness to Carla's knowledge of the will. The DNA test was the final piece, proof that I had legal standing as Terry's daughter. The media coverage intensified. A regional newspaper picked up the story, running a front-page piece titled Family Fraud: The Whitaker Inheritance Scandal. The article detailed how Terry had been systematically stripped of his inheritance, his autonomy, and finally his home. Carla's boutique remained closed, windows boarded up. According to local gossip, she hadn't left her house in days. Night before the court date, I received a text from Rick. "This has gone too far. Meet me at Donovan Park, 9 p.m. Let's end this without more damage." Every instinct pulled me not to go alone, so I called Elijah. "Can you be nearby? Not close enough to be seen, but say no more," he replied. "I'll be there." Rick was already waiting when I arrived, sitting on the same bench where I'd first met Elijah. He looked haggard, the confident businessman replaced by a man who hadn't slept in days. "You've made quite a mess," he said as I approached. "Didn't make the mess, Rick. I just exposed it." He laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you've done. Carla's business is ruined. Our reputation is shot. Even the kids are suffering. Amber's fiancé called off the engagement." "I never wanted collateral damage," I said honestly. "But Terry deserved better than what you did to him." Rick stared at his hands. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. The plan was just to manage Terry's share of the inheritance until he got back on his feet, but then Carla got a taste of controlling the money and ... He shook his head. "Things got away from us." "And what about me? Do you ever plan to tell me who my real father was?" His head snapped up. "You know about that? DNA doesn't lie, Rick." Unlike family, he seemed to deflate further. "That was Carla's decision. She was afraid you'd choose him over us if you knew. And after your mother died," he trailed off. "It doesn't matter now. It's all coming out in court tomorrow anyway." "It doesn't have to," I said. "Terry doesn't want a long legal battle. He just wants what's rightfully his and to be treated with dignity." Rick nodded slowly. "Carla won't agree to settle. She's not thinking clearly right now, but I am." He pulled out an envelope. "This is a cashier's check for $200,000. What's left of the inheritance, plus interest. And a signed statement admitting what we did with the will." I stared at the envelope, suspicious. "Why now?" "'Cause I'm filing for divorce," he said flatly. "And I want to do one right thing before I leave this mess behind." I took the envelope but made no promises. "I'll discuss it with Terry and our attorney." As I walked away, Rick called after me. For what it's worth, he was always a better man than me. "Terry, I mean. You got the good genes, kid." The next morning, media trucks lined the courthouse steps. Sarah met me outside, reviewing our strategy one last time. We decided to present Rick's offer but proceed with a hearing regardless. His statement would be valuable evidence if Carla contested. We were about to enter when my phone rang. It was Pine Valley Care Center. "It's Miss Whitaker. You need to come quickly. Your uncle, ... your father. It's been moved to County General. His condition has deteriorated overnight." I froze, torn between the court appearance we'd fought for and Terry's bedside. "Go," Sarah said firmly. "I'll handle this. Terry needs you more than the court does." I raced to the hospital, heart pounding. Terry had been stable for weeks. What had happened? The answer came from a tired-looking nurse in the ICU. Stress-induced cardiac event. His body's been through too much. Terry lay in the hospital bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, monitors beeping. Steadily beside him. He looked smaller than ever, but his eyes brightened when he saw me. "Hey, kiddo," he whispered. "Sorry to miss the big showdown." "Don't talk," I said, taking his hand. "Save your strength." He shook his head slightly. "Need to say this while I can. I'm proud of you, Lena, for finding me and for finishing what I couldn't. We're going to win, Dad." I said the word, feeling strange and right all at once. "Sarah's at the courthouse now. Rick gave us a statement, confessing everything." A small smile touched his lips. "Dad," he repeated. "That sounds nice." We sat in comfortable silence as morning turned to afternoon. My phone buzzed occasionally with updates from Sarah. The judge was reviewing Rick's statement. Carla had arrived looking distraught. Reporters were everywhere. At 2:17 p.m., Sarah texted, "We won. Judge ruled in our favor. The estate is restored to Terry with damages. Rick's testimony was the final nail." I showed Terry the message, tears of relief streaming down my face. "It's over. We did it." He squeezed my hand weakly. "Read me the letter," he whispered. "The one I left you." I pulled the worn paper from my purse and read it aloud, my voice catching on certain phrases that now held new meaning. When I finished, Terry's eyes were closed, but a peaceful smile played on his lips. "Thanks for finding me," he murmured so softly I had to lean close to hear, "and for finishing what I couldn't." Those were the last words Terry Whitaker ever spoke. He died that night, with his daughter holding his hand, finally free from the prison his family had built around him. The night before Terry's funeral, I sat alone in his hospital room, surrounded by the personal effects the nurses had gathered for me. His wallet with a faded photo of my mother. His watch still ticking stubbornly. A dog-eared paperback he'd been reading. The television in the corner played muted local news. A headline scrolled across the bottom: "Local businessman Richard Whitaker arrested for fraud." The footage showed Rick being led from the courthouse in handcuffs. After the judge ruled in our favor, investigations into the financial records revealed deeper layers of fraud. Rick hadn't just helped hide the will. He'd actively falsified documents and committed perjury during the original probate process. The district attorney had filed criminal charges immediately. I turned off the TV. Victory felt hollow without Terry here to see it. Sarah had called earlier with details about the estate. The judge had ordered the full value restored to Terry's estate with substantial penalties. As his legal heir, everything now belonged to me. The money, the house Carla and Rick still occupied, and all of Grandma's possessions they'd kept for themselves. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. A hospital chaplain peeked in. "Miss Whitaker, I'm Father Michael. I just wanted to check if you needed anything." I shook my head. "Thank you, but I'm fine." He nodded sympathetically. "The funeral home called. They're ready whenever you are." The funeral home. Another stark reminder that this was real. Terry was gone. I'd spent the day making arrangements, selecting a casket, choosing readings. For a man I'd only known as my father for a few brief days. "There is one thing," I said suddenly. Would the hospital have kept a record of what he said? His last words? The chaplain looked surprised. "Sometimes nurses document that." "Would you like me to check?" An hour later, he returned with a page from Terry's chart. In neat nursing handwriting. 1903 hours. Patient spoke to daughter. Said thanks for finding me and for finishing what I couldn't. 2,217 hours. Patient became unresponsive. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my wallet. Whatever else happened, I would keep his last words safe. The morning of the funeral dawned clear and cool. I'd chosen a small chapel near the veteran cemetery where Terry would be interred with military honors. I hadn't invited Carla or her children, but I'd placed a notice in the local paper open to anyone who wished to pay respects. I arrived early, clutching the journal where I'd written my eulogy. The chapel was simple: wooden pews, stained glass windows. A small altar where Terry's casket rested beneath an American flag. To my surprise, people began arriving an hour before the service. First came Elijah with 3 other veterans in pressed uniforms. Then Barbara from the county clerk's office. Dana from Channel 5 slipped in quietly without a camera crew. Several nurses from Pine Valley Care Center arrived together, carrying a wreath of white lilies. By the time the service began, the chapel was nearly full. Most faces I didn't recognize, people who had read Terry's story in the papers or seen the interview, who came to honor a man they'd never met but whose struggle had moved them. When it was time for the eulogy, my legs felt wooden as I approached the podium. I unfolded my notes with trembling hands and looked out at the gathered faces. "My name is Lena Whitaker," I began, "and I'm here to tell you about the strongest man no one ever saw, until now." The words flowed more easily than I'd expected. Stories of Terry's humor, his kindness, his quiet dignity in the face of betrayal. I spoke of fishing trips and bedtime stories. Of the man who'd been my father in all the ways that mattered, even when neither of us knew the truth. Terry taught me that family isn't about blood, I concluded. It's about who stands beside you. When the world turns away, he stood beside me my entire life, even when he could no longer stand at all. And in the end, I'm grateful I could stand for him when he needed it most. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel when I finished. As the military honor guard folded the flag and presented it to me on behalf of a grateful nation, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Terry had his dignity back, even if only in death. At the cemetery, after the rifle salute and taps, people came to offer condolences. Most were strangers with kind words about how Terry's story had affected them. Some shared similar experiences with elderly parents or disabled relatives. Each conversation reinforced that making his story public had been the right choice. The last person to approach was Sarah, my attorney. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a sealed envelope. This was in Terry's personal effects, at the care center. The director found it while clearing his room. The envelope simply read, "For Lena, after." Inside was a single key and a handwritten note. "Lena Bean, if you're reading this, our fight is over. One way or another. This key opens the cabin upstate where your mother and I spent our happiest days. It's yours now. Use it when the world gets loud again. Love always, Dad." I clutched the key tightly, a tangible connection to both parents I'd barely known. That evening, as the sun set over the cemetery, I sat alone by Terry's fresh grave. The day's emotions had left me drained, but strangely clear-headed. "I'm going to be okay, Dad," I whispered to the marble headstone. "And I'm going to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a news alert. "Carla Whitaker files for bankruptcy following fraud investigation." Justice continued its course, even as I focused on saying goodbye. 1 year later, the Whitaker Legacy Foundation occupied a modest office in downtown Pineville. What it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in purpose. The walls were lined with thank you letters from elderly clients we'd helped, photographs of families reunited, news clippings about policy changes we'd influenced. I hung up the phone after finishing a call with our newest client, an 83-year-old woman whose children were trying to force her into a care facility against her will. We'd be in court tomorrow to file for an emergency guardianship hearing. Another win for the good guys. Asked Megan, our paralegal and office manager. I smiled. "We'll see. But I like our chances." The foundation had started small, just me, and a part-time lawyer using a portion of Terry's estate to provide legal aid to vulnerable seniors. Now, we had 3 full-time attorneys, 2 social workers, and a growing reputation as the place to turn when the system failed. Every Friday afternoon, I left the office early and drove 2 hours north to the cabin Terry had left me. The small A-frame by a quiet lake had become my sanctuary. It's a place where I retreated to write, to think, and sometimes just to remember. This particular Friday marked 1 year since Terry's passing. I arrived at the cabin as the sun began its descent behind the pines, casting long shadows across the wooden deck. Inside the manuscript for my nearly completed memoir sat on the desk, the letter he left behind printed across the title page. Writing had been therapeutic, a way to process everything that had happened. The book chronicled not just Terry's story, but the broader issues of elder abuse, inheritance, fraud, and the broken systems that allowed such things to happen. My editor believed it would make waves when published next spring. I made a simple dinner and took it out to the dock, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and gold. In moments like these, I could almost feel Terry's presence. Not in a mystical way, but in the peace that had finally settled in my heart. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, who had become both my attorney and my friend. Thought you'd want to know. Saw Carla today at Baker's Market scanning groceries at Register 6. I felt no satisfaction at the news, only a vague sadness. After the bankruptcy, Carla had lost everything. Her house, her social standing, her boutique. The court had ordered her to repay what she'd stolen, plus damages, leaving her nearly destitute. Her children had distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Rick had faced the harsher legal consequences, serving a year in minimum security for fraud and perjury. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona after his release, starting over where no one knew his name. Justice had been served, but it had left wreckage in its wake. I couldn't bring myself to regret what I'd done, but neither did I celebrate their downfall. The following Monday brought an unexpected invitation. The local chapter of Elder Advocates wanted me to speak at their annual charity gala. "Your foundation's work is changing lives," the email read. "We'd like to honor that." The gala was held at the Pineville Country Club, the same venue where Carla had once hosted her lavish boutique. Fundraisers. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stepped into the ballroom in a simple black dress, carrying the speech I'd written on the cabin's deck. This year's Advocate of the Year award goes to Lena Whitaker, founder of the Whitaker Legacy Foundation, announced the MC, a silver-haired woman I recognized from the city council. In just 1 year, her organization has helped over 200 seniors retain their autonomy, dignity, and financial security. Applause filled the room as I approached the podium. The Crystal Award felt heavy in my hands, substantial like the responsibility it represented. "I accept this in the name of Terry Whitaker," I began. "A man who taught me that true strength isn't about power or money or even the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. It's about maintaining your dignity when others try to strip it away." As I spoke, a memory surfaced. Terry lifting me onto his shoulders at the county fair when I was 6, so I could see the fireworks above the crowd. "Higher, Uncle Terry." I had squealed, and he'd obliged, making me feel like I could touch the sparkling lights. That memory had anchored me through the darkest days of our fight. After the gala, a reporter from the Boston Globe approached me about a feature on the foundation. "Your story has national implications," she explained. "Elder abuse costs Americans billions annually, but few cases receive the attention yours did." The article ran the following month, bringing a flood of calls, donations, and heartbreaking stories from across the country. Each one reinforced what I already knew. What had happened to Terry wasn't unique. The only unique part was that he'd had someone willing to fight for him. When my memoir was published that spring, I dedicated it to Terry Whitaker, father, friend, and fighter. The initial reviews were strong, with the New York Times calling it one of the most honest works about family betrayal and redemption in years. Book signings and interviews kept me busy, spreading Terry's story further than I'd ever imagined possible. But the work that mattered most happened in the foundation's offices, one case at a time. On the anniversary of Terry's death, I visited my mother's grave for the first time. I'd finally learned where she was buried. A small cemetery near the cabin under a simple stone that read, "Beloved." I laid a copy of my book against the granite. "He did right by me," I whispered. "And so did you, in your way." I'd made peace with my complicated origins. The DNA test that had revealed Terry as my father had also opened doors to medical history I'd never known, relatives I'd never met, and a sense of identity that had always felt just out of reach. The foundation's work continued to expand. We established a hotline for reporting elder abuse, created a network of pro bono attorneys across the state, and began lobbying for legislative changes to protect vulnerable seniors. Each success felt like another brick in the monument I was building to Terry's memory. 6 months after my book's publication, I received an email that brought tears to my eyes. A reader wrote, "After reading your story, I reconnected with my estranged father. We lost 15 years to stubbornness and misunderstanding. Thank you for showing me it's never too late for reconciliation." Hundreds of similar messages followed. People finding courage in Terry's story to address their own family wounds, to check on elderly neighbors, to volunteer at senior centers. On a crisp fall day, I visited the renamed Terry's Place, formerly Pine Valley Care Center. After the scandal, the facility had been purchased by a nonprofit that specialized in dignified elder care. They'd invited me to speak at their reopening. Standing in the refurbished day room where I'd last seen Terry healthy, I marveled at the transformation. Gone were the institutional colors and harsh lighting, replaced by warm tones and comfortable furniture. Residents moved freely between indoor and outdoor spaces, engaged in meaningful activities rather than staring blankly at a TV. This is what dignity looks like, I told the gathered staff and residents. This is what everyone deserves. As I drove back to Boston that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had changed in less than 2 years. I'd gone from a magazine writer avoiding family holidays to the founder of a growing nonprofit, author of a successful memoir, and advocate for systemic change, all because of a letter left under a bed. In my apartment that night, I opened my laptop to find an email from a production company interested in adapting Terry's story for film. The producer wrote passionately about honoring his journey with authenticity and respect. I closed the laptop without responding. Some decisions deserve the quiet reflection of the cabin, where Terry's presence felt strongest. That's where I would consider how best to share his story next. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about Carla and Rick, about the lives destroyed by greed and secrets. They had tried to erase Terry, to diminish him, hide him away, make him small enough to forget. But in their cruelty, they had handed me the very tools I needed to ensure he would never be forgotten. They thought they'd erased him, but what they really did was hand me the pen. What would you be willing to sacrifice to uncover the truth about your own family? The answer might be more terrifying than the lies. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find their voice when the world tries to silence them.